Hey everybody, Mike Schumann of the Daily Hoosier here with Seth Tao, following an Indiana 31-7 win over Wisconsin to move to 11-0 for the first time in program history. A third straight win over the Wisconsin Badgers after a series that Wisconsin had dominated for what seemed like decades. The tides have certainly turned here, but it didn't feel that way in the first half, Seth. That was a kind of an ugly start for Indiana. Giving up sacks, weren't able to get Wisconsin off the field at times. It was just a 10-7 game at halftime, and it looked like Indiana might have had a little bit of hangover from the Penn State game.
Yeah, I don't know if hangover is it, but I mean the yardage was really close. It was 159 to 145, so I mean it wasn't even like fluky stuff for Wisconsin. I mean they were really pushing Indiana's defense. They kept running this jet sweep type stuff over and over again, and I mean they weren't throwing the ball that much, but they were converting on some third downs. Indiana's defense just for a few drives couldn't get off the field quick enough, and I mean, Kurt Signetti, I thought also was coaching this pretty conservatively. I mean, he talked about after the game, how he had to decide to punt it on 2 4th-and-1s near midfield, and on one of those he punted it back to Wisconsin, and then Wisconsin went down and scored a touchdown. And I mean, that's just kind of the price you pay sometimes. You get conservative, and it just takes kind of one or two missed assignments or blown plays, and you're staring at a tie game. Indiana goes down and gets a field goal right before the half. And I mean, I've talked about, things like this with this team a lot, that they just find moments to be able to snap their fingers and just lock in, get to that second, third, fourth gear, whatever they need to grab control of the game. And you saw them really do it in the second half, but definitely a lot in the first half that could be concerning.
Could be. Kurt Signetti kind of opened up a little bit in post game in a couple of respects. One, I think he said what we kind of all thought, in the sense that this is a team that's played 6 straight games, a little beat up. The guys that are out with injuries, but just the team as a whole. You think about guys like Khalil Vincent and others on the offensive line that have just been dealing with like minor stuff that just adds up. Yeah, Mikal Kamara has some sort of shoulder issue that I think goes back to when he was a freshman in college. He's been dealing with shoulder stuff. So the overarching theme from Signetti was that this is a well-timed bye week for them. They need this, and historically they've come out of byes really solid. I think they had a bye against Purdue last year leading up to that game and came out and had one of their best games of the year. So I think this is a team that fought through some adversity today and will come out on the other side a little bit fresher in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and that's not even mentioning the guys that they didn't have at all today. Elijah Surratt still didn't play. They were without left guard Drew Evans. And for all the, Fernando Mendoza took 5 sacks today, and he, to his credit, took blame for a lot of that. And, we probably do as media probably not give quarterbacks enough blame for sacks in general. And there were at least 1 or 2 of those that I could see on the field. I was on field level today that it was Mendoza's fault, just, and I think for whatever reason today, it seemed like, he's such a smart player. And I felt like for some reason, maybe it just wasn't all clicking with him today, especially in the first half, like some balls that he should have thrown away. He took sacks on, he was kind of late to get out of the pocket at times. And we don't, his internal timing is usually pretty strong with that. I also think part of that is that Indiana's receivers struggled to get a lot of separation downfield early in the game. And so maybe a lot of his reads just weren't there. So, I mean, that's part of it. But I mean, still, I mean, this is 2 straight weeks that, we've kind of questioned the pass protection. Penn State threw a lot at Indiana last week. And, Mendoza was under constant duress today. I think it would be a huge deal to get Drew Evans back on that offensive line.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it was interesting. Like, I had the sense that Mendoza was having just a average game, and then you look at his numbers and what it ended up being, like 22 of 24, 299 yards, 4 touchdowns, did everything he needed to do to keep himself right at the top of the Heisman conversation with a performance like that. Also set the Indiana single season touchdown record, passing a record set last year, just a sign of the times with Kurt Signetti. Past Curtis Rourke's record of 29 with his last touchdown, number 30 on the season with Fernando. With obviously a lot of games to go, he can kind of set the new bar here over the next at least 3 games that they're going to have, it would seem. So he figured some things out, but I agree. It did seem like he was maybe holding the ball a little bit too long or just being hesitant to run. And I'm not really sure why that would be. But, the other thing Signetti said at halftime that really stood out to me is like,
After the game.
yeah, said at halftime. He said about halftime after the game. That like we were all kind of joking like, oh, he's going to let him have it at halftime. I would love to be in that room and see what he said, but it was the opposite. He said he learned years ago to not lay into the team in those situations, just kind of tell everybody to relax, take a deep breath. And schematically they also found answers in the second half. I think that you talk about the field goal at the end of the first half, also a touchdown drive at the start of the second half. That kind of really, the way Wisconsin offense is, not built to score a lot of points, that kind of put the game away right there.
Even at that point, I don't know that I was going to say that really put the game. I didn't feel like the game, really took a step until when Stephen Daly forced the fumble and then Indiana turned that into quick points. That was the moment that I thought like, okay, I wasn't ever really doubting that Indiana was going to pull this out, even when it was, close in the first half. But it wasn't until the fumble and the quick points right after that to borrow Seth Davis's bit, that you could write it in Sharpie. Right. Like that's the point where I felt like, this game is as good as done.
Yeah, and the defensive adjustments in the second half really stood out. Wisconsin just 23 yards in the second half, just 1 first down. They basically just were not on the field at all. Obviously not a good Wisconsin offense, but they were, with their misdirection, their, like you said, jet sweeps and just other kind of gadget plays. They had Indiana kind of on their heels a little bit in the first half and were able to move the ball. So Indiana clearly figured some things out defensively in the second half and just kind of put their knee on Wisconsin's throat and put the game away. So, I think we talked like it doesn't seem like this is a game you want to overanalyze too much. It's it's pretty, they didn't cover the spread, but it was kind of the game I expected. I predicted 38-3 in the game preview, just thinking, Wisconsin's offense would eventually set up Indiana for some points on with their defensive play, and that's exactly what happened. You mentioned that Stephen Daly strip sack, or I don't think it was actually a sack. I think it was a quarterback run, but had the same effect. So, I think you get the bye. You have Purdue coming up. I don't think anybody expects Indiana to have any real trouble in that game either. I don't know if Purdue has won a Big Ten game since they beat Indiana in 2023. So, there's a really strong chance Indiana is going to be 12-0, and at which point they will clinch a spot in the Big Ten title game.
Well, they could clinch a spot in the Big Ten title game before that Purdue game, sometime during the bye week. I think I would need to look at exactly what combination of results needs to happen, but I believe they could clinch a spot without even playing next week.
Yeah, I know some of the one-loss teams. I think USC and Oregon play each other, so one of them is going to get knocked out. Michigan barely hung on in one today, so they kept themselves in contention, but they've got Ohio State down the road. So, some of those dominoes are going to get knocked down, as you say. Maybe we will know going into the Purdue game, but everything points to Indiana playing Ohio State on December 6th. And
I don't know that it would change anything for Indiana's approach to that game if they had already clinched. I think they would. I don't think you'd see Alberto Mendoza starting that game. I don't think maybe if they were up, big, they kind of take the same approach they often do. If they're up huge going into the fourth quarter, then they'll really start to cycle some guys through. But I don't think you're going to see especially coming off of a bye, even if they know they're going to the Big Ten title game, I don't see the approach changing.
Yeah, I would agree because of the bye. Like you want to have that kind of complete tune-up going into Ohio State. Obviously, balancing not
Ohio State.
Right. I keep saying it. Like I do think Michigan has the potential. Like I don't know why anybody would guess otherwise at this point, given all the fits they've given Ohio State over the last 5 years. But I think Michigan at home has the potential to give Ohio State a hard time. So we'll see how that goes. But anything else you want to touch on in this game that stood out to you? Indiana struggled to run the ball a little bit. It seemed like the running lanes opened up more in the second half. I don't know if that was because Wisconsin was kind of, as Signetti likes to say, their will was broken or what. But for a while, they were struggling to run the ball, which was a little surprising to see.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think a big thing in the first half of the game is Indiana was losing in the trenches, which you don't really see much from this team. And I do think Wisconsin's quarterback, Carter Smith, not the Indiana offensive lineman, Carter Smith, the true freshman Carter Smith that played I mean, his numbers were not very good today. Obviously, I'll give him a little bit of credit, though, in that I think, Indiana only got 2 sacks and weren't, I guess, maybe putting him under duress a ton. But I also think he had something to do with that. I think Indiana was getting into the backfield, but I think it seemed like Smith had a good internal clock and was able to kind of get out of there and evade the pressure and either get rid of the ball or scramble and run the ball. So I'll give him a little bit of credit for that. And I don't think that was entirely Indiana just losing the battle up front. But that's certainly something to watch, just given the way the Penn State. I mean, Penn State is better than this Wisconsin team, but I mean, we saw a little bit of that in that game too. So I mean, that's certainly something to watch going forward. Not necessarily Purdue, but as you start to really get into your postseason, Big Ten title game, and college football playoff. I mean, is that something you need to be concerned about?
I mean, I kind of think so, because I would even go a step further and say like Iowa, that they had those same kind of struggles. Not so much running the football, but just overall in the trenches. Indiana wasn't able to impose their will in that game. I think teams are watching the film of Iowa, Penn State, and others, and kind of getting a sense for how they might be able to impact Indiana's offense and slow them down. And you start talking about the CFP, and you start talking about the Big Ten title game and the type of teams you're going to play in those scenarios. Those are going to be really challenging, obviously. So, if there's a weakness right now on this team, that might be it. But who knows how much of that is this bye week that they need and potentially getting Drew Evans back.
Yeah, just getting healthy, getting some rest physically and mentally. I mean, it's a lot mentally to play 6 straight games in the Big Ten, and I mean, that's where this team is at right now going into the bye week. And I mean, for all of those, concerns, like I said before, there's something to be said for the way that this team can just kind of lock in when they need to. They did it today coming out of halftime. They did it against Penn State for that last drive, their last chance. I mean, even going to the Maryland game, which turned into an absolute blowout, that first quarter against Maryland was kind of tight. And then they just kicked it up a notch in the second quarter and going beyond. So it seems like this team just kind of has that ability to just snap their fingers and lock in and really go cutthroat mode when they really need to. And there's something to be said for that. And that's something that you are probably going to need to be able to do in a playoff game.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like we have this kind of down tone here as we talk about it, but they are 11-0. They're probably going to the Big Ten title game. They're going to the CFP in some capacity. So I guess they got some first world problems right now, is what I would say. I think we can wrap it up right there. Again, it's 31-7 Indiana to move to 11-0 on the season. Bye week coming up. They'll play Purdue on a Friday evening in West Lafayette on NBC. I have a feeling that's going to be a very red and white crowd in the stands there. It'll be interesting to see. But until that time, he is Seth Tao. I am Mike Schumann for the Daily Hoosier. We will talk to you all later.